Okay, so I was at a 4th of July carnival a couple years ago in my town, Rolla. I was with my friends Megan and Gary, and we were having an okay time, but riding the tilt-a-whirl was getting boring, and we wanted to do something more fun. Now, next to the fairgrounds where the carnival was a Kmart, and in the Kmart parking lot was a car wash. Not the kind where you drive through or where they wash your car for you, but where you put the money in the machine and you play with the hoses and wash the car yourself. So Gary decided that it would be a great idea to go through the car wash in our street clothes. It seemed like a good idea at the time because we were 13 and it was summer, and even though it was nighttime, it was still pretty hot out. The fight was so much fun. The only downside was that we had to keep putting quarters in the machine when the water turned off, but it was still worth it. Eventually, when we got bored, we decided to go back to the carnival to see if anything new and fun was going on there. Unfortunately, on the way back to the carnival, I rediscovered what it meant to be absolutely soaking wet. And to make matters worse, I ran into my mom, who had come early to pick me up. On the way home, I also got a lecture about how I was becoming a young adult and needed to learn to make good choices. The lesson I learned: never run through a car wash unless you're wearing a swimsuit.
Well, here's a lesson learned for you. I was hanging out with my dad. We went on a vacation in upstate New York, and he had a good idea that we should take a hiking trip. We took one trail almost all the way up the mountain. It may or may not have actually been a mountain. I was about 6 or 7 at the time, and when you're that age, things just seem a little bigger. At some point, my dad and I started talking, and somehow we got upon the subject where I asked him, "Hey, Dad, can you do anything?" He looked at me, and probably out of the sheer curiosity of the subject, seeing where I was going with this, he said, "Yes." Now, this is probably the point where any kid would try to think of the most outrageous, outlandish thing for their dad to do, if only to prove him wrong. But I just simply asked him, "Can you jump that brick wall over there?" So as soon as he said that, as soon as I said that to him, almost without even thinking, he ran up, threw his hands on the wall, and pushed himself over. When he landed, he had a really surprised look on his face. So I ran up to the wall, looked at him for a minute, and realized there was nothing behind him. Right behind him was a 50-foot straight drop. So I guess my advice to you guys is, look before you leap.
I was in 7th grade. It was a pretty typical day. My friends and I were hanging out at Borders Books and Music, which is a pretty normal location for us to hang out back then. In the back parking lot, there's this huge brick wall right next to these giant bushes. My friends came up with the brilliant idea that we should each take turns jumping into the bush. My friend AJ was the first one to jump in. He rolled right off the bush, said it felt just like stage diving. It felt nothing like stage diving. I fell through the bush a lot faster than I was expecting. I ended up falling on a patch of thorns, ripped open the entire back of my leg. I can't believe I let them talk me into it. I definitely learned not to let my friends pressure me into doing stupid stuff like that.
Oh, hello. I suppose the greatest lesson I've ever learned was when I was an armchair general playing the game of Risk back at the age of 6. It was a great game of Risk. All the barbarians had been conquered, and our two huge empires ruled the whole world. It was mostly a stalemate. It was going on to a huge battle down in the Balkans, but the whole world was controlled by us, and so the whole world was a battlefield. Now, it was hours into this game, and we were both young and really bored, and so he dared me to eat one of my cannons, and I ended up taking this dare. This was a challenge like any other, so I met it head on. I removed 10 armies guarding Indonesia and put them in my mouth. This may, of course, sound exceptionally stupid, but remember, I was only 6. Okay, 14. But, you know, it was pretty much the stupidest thing I'd done in the whole match. I almost choked to death, and I lost all of Australia as a result. The lesson I learned from this, of course, is keep your armies on the field.
Lesson learned?
Sure.
About 2 years ago, I was really into skateboarding because, as a teenager, you needed transportation, but I don't have a car. So I went driving. I was always okay at skating, never great. I made a lot of mistakes. And this one time was particularly memorable. I was going really fast down the street, and I was coming up on a patch of leaves that were lying in the middle of the curb. At first glance, it looks like I could have easily gotten over the patch, but for some reason, when I got to it, my board halted. I flew about 4 feet in the air, until I hit the ground, hard cement streets. So I look back on this patch of leaves, lying on the ground there. There's a huge lead pipe, concealed right under the leaves. So kids, moral of the story is, gravity always wins.